Alright, the scientific method as it applies to humans. Um, Everybody knows about the scientific method. We've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 step process as I want you guys to learn. The FIAC plus report and replicate. The reason I want report and replicate in there is because, especially when it's applied to humans, the scientific method can be just a little bit confusing. For these reasons, there are ethics involved. We can't harm any humans. We need to keep them safe. And there are also some issues with replication that make it sometimes pretty difficult to reenact a specific event or to replicate a specific experiment. And then at the end of the presentation today, we're going to go over the different types of research that are involved in sociology and also psychology. Starting out with ethics in research, safety is the utmost concern. The subjects or the participants in the research have to be safe, and the research has to be worth researching, and the benefits have to far outweigh any kind of risks that may occur. Participants also need informed consent. They have to approve, they have to say that they agree to the research that they're participating in, and they must continue to be informed during the process. That means afterwards as well, being able to be offered a copy of the study once it's complete. The asterisk is there because, as far as observations in public places, can you get informed consent? Probably not. But you are also in a public place, and public places are public, and if you're doing just an observation, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, it's probably okay to just do your observation and say these are the behavior patterns of people at a specific location. Confidentiality: if you publish, when you publish, the names of the subjects, any identifiers of the subjects whatsoever have to be removed. The names have to be private. There are some extra rules that have to be taken into account if you're doing research with minors, but for today's sake and for the sake of what your quiz is, we don't have to worry about that. And then finally, participation in any event is voluntary. You don't have to do it, and the subject has to be able to withdraw at any time, regardless of circumstance, regardless of if it's a paid experiment, regardless of whether or not it will ruin the research or not. Participants must be able to withdraw at any time as they deem necessary. If you want more information on this, feel free to go to the website I've posted below. It is from the American Psychological Association, excuse me, and you can get a full rundown of the APA's ethics at that location. Finally, just some quick advantages and disadvantages of the types and methods of research. Naturalistic research. I'm just going to explain each type real quickly, real succinct, so that you have a good idea tomorrow on your quiz, or so that you have a good idea if you're watching this just for fun. The naturalistic observation, that's what it is. It's observation. You sit down, you watch what's taking place. Scientists can't affect whatever's going on. So it's literally just watching and recording what's being watched. It's an observation. A case study sometimes needs consent and sometimes it doesn't, depending upon what kind of case study you're doing. If you're doing a historical case study, let's say you're researching the different types of emergency responses that occurred after Hurricane Katrina, that's, in this day and age, something that you can look up, you can do the research on, and you can probably get a fairly decent report just doing a case study and not have to do any kind of specific informed consent for anybody. Now, if you did interviews, that's a different story. If you were interviewing somebody, you would have to get informed consent. Now, a case study that needed informed consent right off the bat might be a situation where you wanted to study two individuals that were separated at birth. That would require informed consent immediately. Survey method, I think everybody knows what a survey is. They can be on the phone, they can be via paper. Perhaps even an interview could be considered some kind of a survey. They're cheap, they're fast, they're easy. You can gather data from large amounts of people, but the problem is, depending upon how you word a question bias can really mess up survey results. And if you have questions about that, we'll talk about them in class. Longitudinal study is a study that takes place over a large amount of time. It follows a number of individuals, but it might follow those individuals from birth to 30. That's longitudinal. It goes over a long span of time. It takes a long time, it takes a lot of money, and the problem with longitudinal studies is that even though they're really good and you can study specifically individuals and how time has changed those individuals, the researcher may change. If I started a longitudinal study today and it ran for 20 years, there's no guarantee that I would be around in 20 years to be able to complete that research. I might have a heart attack tomorrow. An asteroid might fall out of the sky. Who knows? But longitudinal research takes a long period of time, and it looks at a cross-section to a degree. It looks at those people over time. Cross-sectional research is similar to longitudinal. It could very well get the same results, but what you're doing is you're taking sections of society and studying them. So you might study 5 to 7 year olds, you might study 8 to 10 year olds, you might study 11 to 14 year olds, 15 to 18 year olds, 19 to 24 year olds, so on and so forth, asking them perhaps the same set of questions to get a cross-section of society. This is a snapshot of society. Correlational studies take statistics and they match those statistics up. They pair those statistics or pieces of data together. Correlational research is data analysis. If, for instance, the cost of ice cream increases and the number of cases of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, decreases, that doesn't mean that the price increase in ice cream caused a drop in diabetes. But the two very well could happen at the same time. It might be that because ice cream was so expensive, people stopped eating it, and that may have caused the decrease in type 2 diabetes. But it doesn't mean that ice cream prices on their own created a decrease in type 2 diabetes. It's a correlation, not a causation. Correlation describes relations. It's a co-relation. And then finally, experimental research. That's the stuff that you do in biology, in chemistry, in physics. Those same experiments, you have to follow that same process. However, you're working with people. And when you work with people, it's very difficult to replicate things because time changes people. If we did a study 20 years ago on the real estate market and we did a study today in the real estate market, we might find that 20 years ago houses sold for a lot more and real estate agents made a lot more money. That could be because in this day and age, the internet has allowed more knowledge out there, so that if you have the time and you want to research your own houses, you don't have to pay top dollar because no longer are the real estate agents the only ones in the know. So that experimental factor, doing that study of real estate agents 20 years ago versus today, they would be two very different studies, and they probably could be replicated, but most certainly without similar results. And without those similar results, it leads to something in all human sciences that really says that there aren't necessarily any laws. There might be theories, but there aren't any laws as to what happens, with the exception of biology. And biology certainly, as we learn more every day, we find out more and more about the brain and about our bodies, and that gets pretty close to laws. We'll talk about this tomorrow in class. I hope you have a good rest of your weekend. Take care.